My name is Matt. So glad you could join us on this Shabbat or whatever day you're watching this message. We're glad that you're hanging with us as we continue our series, Blood Brothers, the story of the sons of Jacob. Every family has a story, and that story's got all kinds of crazy things in it. But God tells his story through a family that is more complicated than your family and mine. So last week, in the beginning of chapter 43, the brothers made shuv, the return. They brought the silver back. They brought Benjamin. They brought an offering with the very items that mark Joseph's trafficking. And everything they used to destroy Joseph, they're now carrying back. And we talked about how you cannot offer to God what you've stolen from your brother. You cannot see God's face while hiding from your brothers. Reconciliation with people is intrinsic to your relationship with God. So last week we ended with verse 15 of chapter 43. Then the men took this offering. They also took the double portion of silver in their hand, as well as Benjamin. So they got up, went down to Egypt, and stood before Joseph. So this week, the rest of chapter 43, the brothers are invited to the vizier's house, and something feels off about that, right? Maybe he's mad about the silver. Maybe he thinks we're liars and he's going to kill all of us. So today's message is part 16 of our series, and it's called The House. Now, Joseph has a plan, and Joseph has a test, and Joseph thinks he's in control. But trauma doesn't stay controlled for very long. Verse 16, when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the one over his house, "Bring the men into the house, slaughter an animal, and prepare it, for the men will eat with me this afternoon." So Joseph sees Benjamin, finally, all 11 brothers, after 22 years, they're all standing in front of him, and he gives orders to his people, bring them into the house, slaughter the animal, prepare a meal. They're going to eat with me. This is not just a casual invitation. This is the second most powerful man in Egypt summoning them into his personal residence. And watch the brothers' response. Verse 18, but the men were afraid. Because they had been brought into Joseph's house. And they said, it's got to be because of the silver that was returned to our sacks. The first time that we were being brought in, maybe he's going to pounce on us and fall on us and take us as slaves and along with our donkeys. They're terrified. It's got to be because of the silver. They think they're about to be imprisoned, enslaved, attacked, and hospitality feels like a trap, a private audience with the vizier, maybe so he can play judge, jury, and executioner. So they tell the truth at the door to Joseph's man before they even step inside. Verse 19. So they approached the man who was over Joseph's house and spoke to him. And at the entrance of the house, I beg your pardon, my lord, they said, we came down on a previous occasion to buy grain for food. And when we came to the lodge and we opened our sacks, behold, there was each man's money in the opening of the sack. It was the full amount of our money. So we returned it we've returned it in our hand. And we also brought down other money in our hand to buy grain for food. So we just didn't know who put our money into our sacks. They're like so afraid and so nervous. We brought the money back. We opened it. I mean, there it was. We're paying it back, what we found. We brought it to you. And the money was for the first batch. Plus, we brought double the money because we're going to get more food. And that's all we want. All we really want is food. We don't really know why we're here for lunch. Now notice, they don't say the money returned to their sacks like it did in the beginning of the chapter. They use the word shuv. They don't use the word shuv, return. They use the word sam in Hebrew, which just means put or placed. It's neutral. It's careful. We don't know who put our money there. They don't know how the money got there. And they're careful not to accuse anyone. I mean, we have to ask, do they think the vizier did it? Why would he do it? They don't know, but they're not going to accuse the second most powerful man in Egypt to his face. They're doing everything right. They're telling the truth about what happened. They've made restitution. They're being diplomatic and they're being honest. And then the steward responds in verse 23. "Be at peace," he replied. "Don't be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given your treasure into your sacks. Your money had come to me." The Hebrew there is shalom lachem, which is different than the traditional greeting, Shalom Alechem. Shalom Alechem is a blessing between friends. Peace be upon you. This is a declaration. It's a command. Be at peace. Have shalom. Stop worrying. And it's a lie. Because Joseph ordered the silver returned, and the steward knows this. He's doing theater, not theology. He's using the right words from the wrong mouth for the wrong reasons. Joseph thinks he's testing his brothers, but God is testing Joseph. And then, as if to seal the deal, it says, then he brought Simeon out to them. Simeon, their brother, the second oldest, who's been imprisoned for months, released. Right there, there's some relief. But the biblical scholar Nahum Sarna says this about Joseph's man. He says his purpose is to lull them into a false sense of relief, reinforced by the release of Simeon. This is a setup. It's bigger than they all know. Verse 24. And the man brought the men into Joseph's house, and he gave them water, and they washed their feet. And he also provided fodder for their donkeys. So they prepared the offering for Joseph's coming at noon, for they had heard that they were going to eat there. You know that like disconnect in a situation that said everything about the situation says you're safe, but your gut says run. Like everything looks fine. The steward's kind. Simeon's released. They're being treated like honored guests, but something feels off. They can't shake it. So they prepare the offering of gum, balsam, and myrrh. Remember last week, these are the items that the Ishmaelites carried when they brought Joseph to Egypt. The very smells that marked his trafficking. So verse 26, when Joseph came home, they brought him the offering in their hand into the house, and they bowed down to the ground to him. Now, trauma doesn't announce itself with rational thought. It hits you in the senses, a smell, a sound, and suddenly you're right back where you were when the trauma happened. For Joseph at 17, back in his worst moment, when he was sold into slavery. And the instruments of betrayal are walking through the door, disguised as an offering. Verse 27. Then he asked if they were well, and he said, is he well? Your elderly father that you told me about, is he still alive? But the Hebrew word here is la shalom. It's how is your shalom? How is your father's shalom? Is there peace? It's the same word that the steward used twice to deceive them. Now Joseph uses it twice. And the brothers respond, your servant, our father, is shalom. He's still alive. Shalom to our father. You may, if you don't remember, back to Genesis 37 and verse 4, before the brothers threw Joseph in a pit, it said they could not speak shalom to him. They hated him so much that they couldn't even greet him with peace. Shalom Alechem. Now the steward speaks shalom as deception, and Joseph asks about shalom, and the brothers answer with shalom, and the word that couldn't be spoken 22 years ago is now being spoken. But it's not complete, and it's not whole. And then the verse finishes with, then they bowed down, knelt and bowed down. If you're counting, that's 2 times that they bow. 11 brothers bow down to Joseph, just like the dreams in Genesis 37. 11 sheaths bowing, sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowing. And in Genesis 42, only 10 bowed because Benjamin was missing. Now all 11 bow twice. Dreams fulfilled. 22 years from the pit to this moment. Quietly, exactly, on time. Joseph arranged the test, but God arranged the fulfillment. Verse 29. Then he lifted his eyes, and he saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, is this your younger brother whom you mentioned to me? Then he said, may God be gracious to you, my son. Joseph sees Benjamin for the first time, his brother, his mother's son. The Hebrew root word here for gracious is chanan. It's to be gracious or to show favor. And Joseph speaks shalom to all of them, but he blesses only Benjamin with favor. This is deliberate on Joseph's part. Verse 30, then Joseph hurried out because his compassion grew warm and tender towards his brother, so that he wanted to cry. So he went into an inner room and wept there. The Hebrew word for compassion is rachamim. It means compassion, but it also comes from the word for womb, which is rechem. This is the same compassion that God felt for Rachel when he opened her womb after years of barrenness and gave her Joseph. Genesis 30, verse 22. Then God remembered Rachel, had compassion on Rachel, and listened to her, and opened her womb. Rachamim, rechem. Now Joseph feels the same womb compassion for his brother Benjamin, the only other person who came from Rachel's womb. He can't hold it together. He has to rush out. He weeps. He washes his face. He controls himself. He comes back. Serve the food. The test continues at the table. But before we see what happens at the table, we need to understand what the house is. A few weeks ago, we saw how Pharaoh's house became the ark that saved the family during famine. Now watch what Joseph's house becomes. The brothers bring an offering into the house. They bow before Joseph twice in the presence of one who sits in authority. There's a slaughtered animal, and they eat a sacred meal. They're separated by groups. There's order and holiness, just like the priests eating in the presence of God. Joseph's house is functioning like the future tabernacle. We don't know about the tabernacle until Exodus, but the narrator is using tabernacle language on purpose: offering, sacrifice, bowing, sacred meal, presence. And we know what the tabernacle is all about because God says to Moses in Exodus 25 and verse 8, "Have them make a sanctuary for me so that I may dwell among them." The whole point of the tabernacle is presence. God wants to dwell in the presence of his people, not far off, not distant, not watching from heaven while we figure it out on our own. No, he wants to be with us, here, among us. And that's what Joseph's house is becoming, a place of presence, just like the future tabernacle. The house is a place where estranged brothers are brought near, where offerings are made, where meals are shared, where reconciliation becomes possible. But it's not just about the brothers. There's actually two reconciliations that are happening at this meal. The first is between Israel and Egypt. Shem's descendants and Ham's descendants from the flood in the same house, eating the same meal, but not yet at the same table, a step towards reconciliation that's not yet complete. The second reconciliation is the 12 tribes must become one people, not 2 and 10 as the brothers describe themselves, but 12. The last word of the scroll of Genesis is Egypt. And Exodus begins with slavery and Moses and leads to one nation that arrives at Mount Sinai together. And none of that can happen if the sons of Jacob stay fractured. See, Joseph's house is the hinge. This is where Israel and Egypt meet, where the sons of Jacob become one family, where the tabernacle pattern gets previewed, offering sacrifice, bowing, sacred meal, presence. But the tension is you can have all the right elements and still miss the presence. The brothers bring the offering, check. There's a slaughtered animal, check. They bow, check. They eat the meal, check. But Joseph is hidden and still in disguise, separated, alone at his own table. The form is there, but the presence is withheld. Well, last week we talked about how you cannot love God and hate your brother. John said it plainly in the New Testament. If you say you love God but hate your brother, you're a liar. Reconciliation with other images of God is intrinsic to our relationship with God. You cannot see God's face while hiding from your brothers. And it's the same pattern here, the same truth. But remember what else we said last week. You can only do your part to reconcile. You can't do their part. It only takes one plus God to heal. Reconciliation takes two. In the words of Louis Armstrong, it takes two to tango, two to tango. The brothers have done their part. They brought back the silver. They brought Benjamin. They made the offering. They confessed at the door. And Joseph's still hiding, still testing, still responding from trauma instead of from God's presence. The tabernacle isn't just about getting the structure right. It's about God dwelling among his people. And Joseph's house isn't just getting his brothers to the table. It's about whether Joseph can be present with them, really present, or whether his walls will keep him hidden even when his brothers are right in front of him. Verse 32, it says, so they served him by himself, them by themselves, and the Egyptians who were eating with him by themselves, for Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews because it was an abomination to Egyptians. There's three groups at the meal. The Egyptians, Joseph, who's sitting by himself, and the 11 brothers. The separation remains because it's not reconciliation yet. It's theater. Verse 33. They were seated before him, and the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked at each other in astonishment. Why? Because how did he know our birth order? The brothers look at each other like, how does he know these things? He sat us from the firstborn to the youngest, and Benjamin, the youngest, is at the end. He has the lowest status, which makes what happens next even more shocking. Verse 34. Then portions were brought out to them from before him, and Benjamin's portion was 5 times larger than any of their portions. Benjamin gets 5 times as much food as his brothers. The youngest, the lowest in status, gets the most. This is the coat of many colors all over again. In fact, Joseph is recreating the exact conditions that destroyed him 22 years ago. Favoritism, beloved son, 10 brothers watching. Will they do to Benjamin what they did to me? And look at how they respond. They drank and made merry with him. Look at the change. There's no jealousy. There's no resentment. They're fine with it. But Joseph doesn't understand that. The test isn't over. Look, if they reject Benjamin, then Joseph keeps Benjamin, sends the 10 away, and reveals himself only to Benjamin. But if they accept Benjamin, then Joseph doesn't know what happens next. That's not part of the plan. His plan doesn't include reconciliation. Joseph built walls. He became unreadable. He learned Egyptian. He changed his name. He married into Pharaoh's court. He became someone his brothers would never recognize. And those walls kept him alive in prison. They helped him survive betrayal. They got him to the second highest position in Egypt. And now, those same walls are keeping him from the very thing he never imagined, which was reconciliation with his family. Joseph is testing whether his brothers have changed, but his assumption is that they haven't changed. He expects them to do to Benjamin what they did to him. Or Joseph's expectation is that his brothers are the same men who threw him in the pit. And they are not the same. They brought back what they took. They confessed what they did. They made the offering. They're doing everything right. And they cannot control Joseph's response. But in the house of the Lord, everything looks different. When we respond from unhealed trauma, we create the conditions that hurt us, not to heal, but to protect ourselves, thinking that if we control it this time, I won't get hurt again. This is what defense mechanisms do. We build them in adolescence to survive childhood, and they work because we make it out of childhood. But we carry the same defense mechanisms into adulthood. We treat them like they're part of our personality, when really they're creations of our false selves that once rescued us. But now, as adults, harm us and other people around us. We have a choice to respond from hurt and pain or from a place of healing. And when we respond from healing, the story changes entirely. It's not doing the opposite for the sake of being different. It's different because you are different. The question for us is not, have the people who hurt you changed? The question is, have you changed? Are you still trying to protect yourself by using the same patterns that hurt you in the first place? Are you still setting traps? Are you still testing? Are you still waiting for people to prove they're different while you stay the same? Trauma freezes people in our memory. We see them exactly as they were in their worst moment, and we can't see past it. We can't see who they've become, and we can't see who we have become. But being in God's presence unfreezes our vision. We see people as they are now, not just as they were then. We see people the way God sees them. Remember what we just said about the tabernacle. You can have all the right elements and still miss the presence, the offering, the bowing, the sacrifice, the sacred meal, everything in place. But if you're hidden, if you're separated by walls, the form can be there, but the presence is withheld. God doesn't just want the structure. He wants to dwell with you. Not distant, not watching from heaven while you figure it out alone. Here, with you, among you. This is what it means to be in the house of the Lord. Not just doing religious things, not just showing up externally, but really present. Not hidden behind defense mechanisms that you built years ago. Really present. And when you're really present with God, everything changes. You see yourself differently. Not as the person you were in your worst moment, but as who God is making you now. And you can see others differently. Not frozen in their worst moment, but as people who can change, just like you have changed. You respond differently, not from old wounds, but from new healing. Not from self-protection, but from God's presence. And this is what responding from His presence looks like. You listen to His voice, not the voice of your pain. You love yourself as He loves you, not from self-protection. And you see others as He sees them, not frozen in time. And that changes every relationship. Your spouse, your kids, your parents, your coworkers, the person who hurt you years ago, because you're not the same person anymore. And the truth is, neither are they. Well, next week, we're going to watch as Joseph's plan falls apart. And Joseph's plan doesn't fall apart because he didn't work a good plan. It's because healing is going to interrupt his revenge. I love you guys, and I hope you'll join us for the reconciliation of Joseph and his brother.